My goal is to build a production quality software without looking at the code, not less code review, none. And I'm 3 months in on parental leave, working 2 hours at night, trying to prove it works. Hey, audience, welcome to Very Good Engineering. Our guest today is Peter Trost, senior Flutter engineer at one of Germany's fastest growing energy software companies, 1,5. And on the side, he's building a property management startup the way most engineers wouldn't dare, with only AI. Today, we get into how, why, and what's actually working and breaking. Peter, welcome to Very Good Engineering.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been following your story in LinkedIn and it's fascinating. I think our CEO, David, kind of like put your story on my radar. And I was like, oh, that's the perfect type of story that we want to hear on Very Good Engineering. There's so many approaches to great engineering, and you're taking one that is very new. It's very brave. I'm sure that you're finding ways that like you don't even know what's gonna be the outcome. So I think that there's an element of like exploration, innovation that you're going after, right? But one of the things that as I get to know you a little bit better, I admire is that you have this healthy ambition. You're very open about sharing your goals, and you're not kind of like, oh, this is not because I'm like super ambitious and I'm gonna willing to do anything on my way. It's like, no, it's just like that's for you a way of sharing like your joy and your passion. So walk me a little bit how you got here, right? Like I understand that you started computer science with a focus on AI and machine learning, but now you're building apps. How did that happen?
Yeah, so maybe let's start at the very beginning, more or less, or give a bit of background also. Like, I always liked sci-fi and technology, so that was the main genre I was interested since I was a kid. And another thing that came from my interest in personal growth is also psychology, and then connecting these things through human machine interfaces. And that's also how I got to computer science, because I wanted to study something around human machine interfaces, but my grades weren't good enough to get into that specific field. So computer science was like adjacent to it. So I started that. And then from these interests around psychology and technology came the interest in AI. And during computer science, during my bachelor, that was like I started 10 years ago. So back then it was around neural networks and machine learning mainly. So I did a bunch of that and learned about these things, but sooner than later realized that most of this is basically data cleaning and transformation. So you have to gather a bunch of data, clean it and transform it in a way so you can actually train those models, and a lot of math. And both of those things weren't as exciting to me as I would have hoped, let's say, because I spent quite a few years in that area. And then after my studies, so after I did my master's, where I also dove into more of the direction of autonomous driving and computer vision, at my first job, I had the opportunity at a consultancy to build a little desktop app. And up until then, it was machine learning and a bit of Python backend things. And then I worked without a framework with raw JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and just about got a desktop app running. And then I realized I really like building intuitive apps, like interfaces where you really, enjoy playing around with or using the thing, much more than building APIs with Python or cleaning data to get a AI model working. I really liked using them, but I didn't like training them. So that was basically the shift back then. And that's also where I started doing Flutter. So I basically went on Google and I was like, okay, I have an idea for an app, which is a guided journaling app, because I've been journaling for years and at that point. And then I thought, okay, that's should be an app for my mobile, like my iPhone, Android back then. And then I went on the web and was like, okay, React Native or Flutter, and then read basically a few blog posts and then decided on Flutter because it was said to have the better developer experience. And that's what it was. So, and then I applied for a new job where I was a full Flutter engineer. Back then it was still junior, obviously, but I learned very fast because I built that app on the side, and everything I learned in the job, I applied in my spare time and the other way around as well. And then I think it was in 2023, where end of 2023 or 2024, where I really started using ChatGPT mostly for non-working code. Like back then it was like, okay, write me this piece of software, this piece of functionality, and you would copy paste it over into your VS Code or whatever IDE you were using. And then usually the syntax was wrong and it just didn't compile. And even if you fixed it, it would probably still not work. So yeah, that was back then. So that's where I mainly started with using LLMs to code. And then over time, it came more and more that, and then was Cursor, Tab, Copilot came out. And that's where I went like back and forth between the best thing that was on the market at any given moment, more or less.
Mhm. I think it's fascinating. I see a trend when talking to people where like we refer to 2023 as if it was like ages ago. It's
Yes.
like, oh, that's where like dinosaurs use technology, right? It's like it's
Yeah.
not so long ago actually. To the point where like, yeah, it feels like now in 2026, like we're in the middle of 2026, it feels like, oh, everything like the tooling around AI, augmented engineering has improved so much. Even I would say like it all happened last year, like by the end of 2025, there was like a big jump in quality. But I wouldn't say even the industry yet has figured out how to operate in this new mode, kind of like what would be standards and best practices, right? So I really admire people that are willing to explore and go to places that are like unknown. Kind of like knowing like, hey, I might
Yeah.
just hit a wall and I have to reverse back all my time and operations. But the hypothesis is worth proving it out, right? So
Yes. I mean, hitting a wall is definitely part of it. So you have to basically embrace failing and trying and then trying again until things work. And especially with the approach I'm trying to take with that property management business I'm building on the side, it's all about like embracing that you don't know how to properly use the tools and you have to figure it out, especially because they're changing so much and getting better by the week. I mean, the newest cloud model now came out, I think, a month or a few weeks after the last one. It's crazy how fast things are moving in that area.
out of curiosity, I'm gonna ask you two questions before we jump into the property management side, which I think it's also like a very fascinating story. But you are one of the few people, not that I've met a lot of people, but like that we've had in the podcast. Actually, I think you are the first one that has worked or like has been trained in machine learning, artificial intelligence before like large language models. How was working in the field back then when like large language models didn't exist?
I mean, I don't have a real comparison to how like research around large language models felt and the areas. What I did was mostly studying the things. And then as a working student, I applied it to a company that does, how's it called? Coal mining. Yeah. So we did some things to train models on visual to improve like maintenance and reliability of the machines there. So that was like very early on in my career still. So I wouldn't consider myself really having felt how research worked in that area and how they compare to each other.
Yeah. And the other question I had for you is like you've actually done a journey of going from kind of like, hey, I started like more on the algorithm side, like data normalization, cleanup, sanitization, machine learning, like heavy on the math, heavy on the backend and algorithms. You've made that transition to the app side, which I feel like very few backend developers do, but it's a journey that a lot of front end developers do because like sometimes like uh like if you want to develop like a full product, you need to be able to operate more in the front and the back end. But I think that there's a lot of like back end specialized people that like they stay kind of like in a very specialized domain. How was learning for you like front end? You mentioned like reading a few blog posts, and that's kind of like what sparked your interest in Flutter. You remember like a few talking points that were like, aha, that's why we need to follow like that Flutter journey.
I mean, for me, it was clear from the beginning that I'm gonna pick a cross-platform framework because I didn't do something that was deeply native or anything where I would need like the native languages or frameworks. And then it was the decision between React Native and Flutter. And back then it was mainly around the developer experience where I just said, okay, Flutter is just sounds like it has better ways to debug things like hot reload, things like, mm, I mean, yeah, widget inspector and the widget tree and so on. And I really started enjoying the Dart programming language. I came from Python, I learned Java, I did a bit of JavaScript, and Dart is just the language I liked the most from all I worked with.
Yeah, I keep hearing that like me. I mean, I've been kind of like helping people to learn Dart and Flutter for years. I feel very old at the moment. But I always say like, hey, if you know how to code in any other language, congratulations, you know Dart already, because it's kind of like everything is natural, logical. Gets inspiration from a lot of different places. So it feels very easy to transition to Dart and feel productive with very little like time or learning curves or anything like that. All right, property management. Um, it has nothing to do with the work that you do at 1.5. So why property management? Why exploring that space?
Property management, it's not really a topic that I'm super interested in actually, but my father has built software, ERP software for a single property manager for the past 20 years. So I heard about the industry every now and then. And for the past years, it's always been like, okay, hey, you're now also a software engineer. Why don't you join and we continue building this and porting this to a new language? Because there were some constraint in the way he built it back then. And then I recently had the idea to just get a Claude Max subscription and then like build this AI first business. And that was the first thing that then came to mind to do this porting of this legacy system and also work with my father and my brother a bit together in my free time. So that was basically it. And then I did some research with Claude and realized that, okay, rebuilding a legacy ERP system and then getting it into the market in Germany can be super hard, where you have months or years of sales cycles, and it's super hard for property managers to switch to another software because all their data is in the software, all the processes are based on that software. So to get started a bit faster and get into the market, and for especially for me who has no clue about the industry, learn about the industry and how they talk, how they do things, I did some research with Claude to find a niche that is easier to get started and just like an add-on, like I'm doing right now. And it came back with some ideas. And the one I'm doing now was like underserved and clearly showing that the existing apps are just not very good.
So that's kind of like where you're going, attacking that niche, trying to build like the best experience providing in the market. Would you like to show a demo of what you're building before we talk about how you're building it?
Sounds good, yeah. I can show
Awesome.
you a quick demo. Let's jump into the app directly.
Yeah, and I know that this is kind of like we're getting like a sneak peek of something that is not even on the market yet. So I really appreciate that you're
Yes.
giving us access to what could be a secret superpower.
Yeah, it's definitely like a very early development version still. And the way I'm building right now, pre-release, is also very like, I mean, fire and forgot might not be the right phrase, but every night when I'm building, the next morning or during the night, things get merged by the agents, and then the next morning, sometimes things are broken. So it always is there's always a possibility that some things don't work at that specific moment. But right now, so everything is in German because I'm starting to target only the German market. But the idea basically is that property managers regularly go on site to their properties and then walk the property to check for any damages, for example. Or an owner of an apartment calls them and says, "Hey, there's an issue. Please go check it out," and then dispatch some work orders so this gets fixed. And all of that is currently mostly still done with pen and paper, or they just take photos and send it through WhatsApp, or have to manually then also write the emails to for the work orders basically. And that's everything we're trying here, is making this more digital, more easy, save time, and also leverage AI, or in this case LLMs, to pre-write the work orders, for example, and make this just much more easy. And we have two ways of doing this right now. So the first one is like a free recording where you just talk to your phone without a checklist, without anything. You walk the property. Whenever you see an issue, you just talk to your phone. That gets transcribed, and then the AI structures it into findings and then creates a report for the owners. And after that, also the work orders. That flow is currently actually broken because I recently added the second one, which I checked right before our session here. So the checklist is now working, which is also a feature that I added based on the feedback I got from property managers. And I'm gonna pick a property here and then a template for the inspection, and then basically it should start it up. Not sure, it's taking a bit. And then you can just go through the checklist items, say, okay, this is okay, or there's an issue. You can add additional notes and photos, or just say, okay, this property, for example, doesn't have a whatever, a garage or something, so we can just skip it. And then you go through this whole thing, and then let's see, for example, here there is an issue, or on this one as well. And then we go through all these things.
Believe it or not, when I was in school, I learned German for 4 years and then I work at BMW for another 4 years. So I think I can understand 80% of what I'm seeing on the screen.
Awesome. That's really cool. So you can translate for everyone watching.
Absolutely. If you need a German translator, call me. I'm your guy.
Awesome. So, and when they're done with their inspection, they click the primary button here, and it will create the report at the top and give you an overview of the actual issues. And then you can click this bottom button. So it will go through the issues with an LLM and then also get the data about the tradespeople they have on file, more or less, and then correlate them so the LLM can directly generate the report for the respective tradespeople. And here I have a bunch of dummy data, so the assignment doesn't work as expected. But the end result is that you can then use the native share model here to share the report, or like via email, WhatsApp, whatever channel they use to contact their owners and the tradespeople. And that's basically the whole idea of the MVP scope here.
Sounds good. Again, like you've pretty much didn't write any single line of code, right? You've been guiding the agents. It's like whatever the code is, that's a
Yes.
black box for me. So tell us a little bit how you've been building this project, because as we were kind of like chatting to prepare this session, one thing that I found very interesting is that you're pretty much using AI to its max capacity, you're maxing out on even more than one model and tool. So yeah, if you had to kind of like tell your secret recipe for people on how to build with AI and how you're using it, get us through what that looks like.
Yeah, I think screen sharing makes most sense here. Then I can just show you how I built that specific project in
Sounds
that
great.
case. Yeah. So right now, this is basically what I'm mainly using. This is the interface to the code, also steering the app. In some cases, I just let the agent do itself. So shout out to Lean Code for the Marionette MCP. That's super awesome tool to let agents just run through and use the Flutter app. But what you see here is basically Claude Squad, which is a little tool that allows you to manage sessions with your Claude Code agents. So you can press the N key and then enter a branch name. So fix, for example, inspections recording, which I said earlier is broken right now. And then it will set up a work tree and manage the whole work tree for you. And then you can go here and start off with some prompt to get something fixed or done. And what I also often do is just ask it about strategic things. So that's the next part of this. The agents are better the more context they have on the thing you want to build. And in this case, it's a business. So what I'm doing here is everything I have and know and learn about the business, I'm trying to get into the repository. So we have a knowledge. Let me zoom in a little bit more. We have a knowledge directory that is based on Andrew Carpathy, I think he built that structure where you can just put in raw documents and you have instructions on how to manage the wiki with also cross references and so on. So you can open that even in Obsidian and then have a nice graph where you can see connection between different topics, which is super useful for understanding things. And in this case, helps me learn about the industry. And then I also have documentation on things like branding, business, which contains strategy. I have my whole like outreach playbook, let's call it, where I have the email templates that I use for cold outreach
Mhm.
and the strategy, the ideal customer profile, and so on. So there's pretty much everything about the business is inside this repository and obviously all the code. So the services, Superbase backend, the apps up here. I have a bunch of web apps and also the mobile app in here. And yeah, so
Pretty much this repository is your entire business.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you interact and collaborate with agents? Because clearly, like if there's so much knowledge around your own business, even competitors, brand, and all the stuff, do you let agents do research on what to build? Are you the one kind of like, no, that is the area where like I want to have full control? Like, tell me a little bit about how do you go from collaboration, business research, analysis to then like, okay, we're making the decision that this is what we build.
Yeah. So I'm usually using the superpowers skill set or plugin. For those
Hmm.
of you who don't know, that's a set of skills you can use for say guided software development process, including brainstorming, the spec writing, reviews, quality assurance, and that gives a very nice like process where you can brainstorm with the AI, where it does research, it presents options, you can pick between options and then go ahead and maybe discuss or push back on things. And that's also what I usually do for business related things. So when, for example, like I said earlier, to find the niche, I use the Claude app to do a bunch of deep research on the industry, on different avatars and software to use or processes that can be automated, and then picked one that made most sense for an app and from the knowledge I have about the industry and also the expertise I can bring to the table.
Have they ever, as part of that, like research and collaboration? I would imagine that as, or at least this happens to me. Um, we always have our biases. Of course, we have a history, our context, and even like experience. So usually you have like a hypothesis or an idea of like, this is kind of like what the next thing is going to be of high value and all those things. Have you ever been proved, not necessarily like wrong, but like as part of that collaboration with agents, like lead to a conclusion that was different than your initial hypothesis that made you like change your mind or consider a different approach or strategy?
First thing that comes to mind is more like blind spot in system design or how I build and engineer things. So, for example, things like rate limiting or well, I think one of the biggest things that I learned is like that you have to warm up a domain before you do cold email outreach. Otherwise, you'll just land in the spam folder and then the whole marketing outreach motion dies basically. So that was something where I said like, okay, let's go ahead and send 1,000 emails, find 1,000 leads, and then I get all the leads I need and can process and have a call with. And then Claude was like, no, 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 that won't work. And that's what I learned. So I think actually also saying this, the most things I actually learned that are new are in non-engineering related contexts about business. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's artificial intelligence as a learning partner, as a tutor, as a mentor, has a lot of potential. Up to the point where, like, I mean, actually, I think that if you see what's out there in the community, in social, and all the stuff, you have these stories of like solopreneurs that is like, hey, I'm good at engineering, so I feel comfortable building a product. But in order to build a company and go solo and try to grow beyond Indeed, right? All of a sudden, like marketing, sales is highly important. How you think about the product, design, and all those things, right? Like engineers, we have a tendency of like building the thing right, but maybe we're not building the right thing, right? And one
Yes.
of the things that I'm like learning the most about AI is like when you utilize it as a third partner in areas where you're not an expert, like you can actually have an expert working with you. So all of a sudden, it allows you to operate more as a proactive and sounds executive than not like as a glorified executive. Like sometimes for me, when using AI, I don't want to necessarily go faster and build more things. No, I just want to make sure that what I build is the right thing. But the way you would kick off a traditional start, I was like, okay, I get funding or like I start kind of like I bootstrap and I start solo. Then you reach a limit where like unless you have a strong series of skills that they don't teach at school, like if you go to engineering school, yeah, you might have an econ class or whatever, but it's not like how to get started with your own business or whatever. But with AI, like, hey, let me continue up to develop where like people develop like their own like executive team, chief of marketing, chief of staff, like all the stuff. That's where I see a lot of potential and very interesting use cases for people with creative needs to explore. And it seems like you're going down that path, right?
Yeah, definitely. Exactly what you're saying. It opens up the possibility to really nerd out on the topics you are that are important to you. Like for example, building the code right and building building it right, and then using AI for everything around it, building the right thing. So doing the research to build the right thing, learning or doing the marketing. I mean, you can take it so far that you only focus on what you truly like. For example, if you really like coding, you can just do the coding more or less yourself or assisted, but still build a whole business by building the systems using AI to do marketing, to prepare, I don't know, sales script and the offer and whatever else you need for a business. And I think this really enables engineers maybe even more than other people because we know how to use these tools and build the technology to build businesses. So I think it's super exciting.
Tell me a little bit more. Uh, have you even defined your own kind of like marketing agent, or like do you have a specific roles that you interact with, or like how did you approach that? that kind of like, hey, let's build the company as like as a structure of roles, not necessarily as the product we're building. How was that process? What inspirations did you get? Did you use AI to actually even build that part? Like how did that go?
Yeah, I don't have real roles yet defined. So specific agents that have more or less personalities or specific roles, but more like workflows. So for example, one thing I can show is outreach. I have a whole set of outreach skills defined that do like lead gen. So they do research on specific, mm, yeah, web pages to find property managers and then throw that into a Notion database. And I have the outreach draft, which uses the email template that I told earlier to draft the emails and add like um, appointment proposals. Then I have a outreach sync, which reads my Gmail inbox to check who said they are not interested, or who is interested, so we can schedule a meeting and so on. And then also the outreach send, obviously, which then just sends the emails. And that's one of the things. And another thing I think is kind of interesting. It's another idea where I built a marketing more or less system around free tools. So just like there's a whole way you can go about marketing for a product is building free tools that are then found through, for example, Google. And then people use this, and on that website you make ads or advertise for your main paid service, for example. And I have a few skills that do research that then also validate or first the ideas, then they do research on the ideas if they are feasible to build and also legally sound enough, especially for property management. There are a lot of legal things you have to keep in mind while building. And I'm trying to not have to pay any legal counsel before I have revenue. So I'm trying to prompt AI in a way that it only suggests or builds ideas that are somewhat safe to build without me having to fear anyone suing me, for example. So that's also something I'm trying to be and do. And so that's another workflow. And I think I built 10 or 11 free tools in 3 hours after I had those skills ready. So you can put out a lot of stuff once these things are set up.
I'm very curious to hear how you fight. Here, let me ask it this way. I'm pretty sure that as you kind of like build the company this way, you start to realize that, especially when you apply AI, there might be opportunities in even in other fields that are not property management. Like you've been talking about, like pretty much like building from ground zero, like entire marketing approach without a marketer in the team, all the stuff. Like, how do you find the urgency to be like, oh, that is also like a very cool idea to explore and I can start a business? Like, how do you keep the focus on property management, or like, do you keep track of like ideas of like, hey, if we ever need to pivot here, like I can explore all this cool stuff.
Yeah, that's such a good question, especially for those who are like really who really like to try out new things and build things. That's such a great thing where you see something and then think, oh, that's a great opportunity. Let's jump on this. Or you hear from a friend, hey, I did this, or I don't know, from Starter Story, you hear a
Yeah.
new success story, and then you go like, oh, okay, I can apply this to whatever my hobby or something like that, and then make money off of that. I always try to remind myself of the woman in the red dress. So I have that from Alex Hormozy. Some of your listeners might also know him. He's like a let's call it a business educator. Super interested. I'm consuming a lot of stuff from him, and he always says like focus is one of the most important things. Like just eliminating all alternatives. And there also talks about the woman in the red dress, which comes from the Matrix movies, where you just get distracted, and then in that case you might get killed. In the real world, you might waste your best years chasing different things, but not building out the one thing you could have focused on. So I think, or for me, it's that reminder plus the belief that when I focus on one thing for long enough and then am flexible in how I build for the property management niche, then I will become successful at some point because I
Mm-hmm.
learn what works, what doesn't work, what people need and will pay for, and what they won't. And as
Mm-hmm.
soon as I start going to the next thing that could work, I'm losing a lot of that progress that I made and the learnings that I have because other industry work completely different. For example, I know it from 1,5 from my main job. Many complexities as in the industry or in the energy industry. Also in Germany, a whole another level of complexity that when you have been in that industry for a few years or just a few months, you already learned many things that you can then overcome and yeah, give value to the customer, build greater products that you can't have if you keep switching between different opportunities.
Yeah, and that is such a, especially for people with an entrepreneurial spirit, right? It's such a big tension sometimes there because also like, I mean, everyone's definition of success might be different, right? Like sometimes it's about time, sometimes it's about like serving your clients, sometimes it's about money. And there's one thing that I've learned is like there's no right or wrong approach, as long as you are like true to yourself, right? Uh, but sometimes we've seen cases of people that they had the right idea, but either they didn't develop it like further enough to let it kind of like grow and be successful. Some people that waited too long to escape out or pivot or just get like, hey, this is not
Mm.
working right. And that is such a like hard skill. And I think that sometimes you have the bias of like, especially like entrepreneurs of like trying because like I tried this for a period of time and didn't work. And all of a sudden, like it's like, well, maybe we didn't have that idea of definition of success or anything like that. So to me, like the fact that you are kind of like acknowledging like that focus is very important, is something that I admire. Because it's something that like occasionally I struggle with. So when I see it like
Same.
put in,
Yeah,
I
same.
admire.
It's,
Also, like you were
especially
mentioning, like,
with how much AI enables you to do things. Like building an app from scratch can be done like in a weekend to like an MVP state where you can really solve a small problem and have something that is releasable and working, even for a software engineer that has somewhat high expectations, because you can review in a weekend a small app and let it just built by AI. Yeah, so definitely. And one thing I wanted to circle back on is also the way about focus for me in the property management app, as I said earlier, is also that I started out with trying to port an existing legacy ERP software and then learned a new thing about the industry and then pivoted away. And then I think I first built the checklist feature. Then I
mhm.
dropped it again to the voice first, basically. Then I talked to more clients or more leads. And then I learned they need the checklist feature. So I added it back in. So there's a lot of like you can be focused while still being flexible in a bit of a way. So I think you still need both, but
Yeah.
with the right balance, let's say.
So I wanted to get back to you. You mentioned like the starter story, um, like YouTube channel and all the stuff. I love it. I had to stop watching it because it was giving me so much FOMO. Uh, Something that we haven't mentioned actually is like you're doing all this while like you have like kids and all the stuff. I do too. I don't know how you manage to multitask. In my case, kids and work steal all my time. So uh, it was kind of like giving me this idea of like I'm not doing anything of like like that it's good with my life. And then I was thinking like no, actually like working and parenting seems like a big enough job. But they're superheroes like you doing it all at the same time. So kudos to you. Um, let's get
Thank
back
you.
to the building part of what you do, right? because you were saying like, hey, you've been using like superpowers. It's a great plugin. Actually, at VGB, we released something called VGB Winspan that is very inspired by superpowers, compound engineering from every and all the stuff, but like also like tries to get us closer to just what we would do like in front end, just with kind of like Flutter and all those things. But guide me through how you would start kind of like prompting your agents. Like you were talking like, hey, have them running overnight. Like what is your approach to orchestration, things like that?
Yeah, so usually the workflow will just be, and I think maybe I can just start one off here because, as I said earlier, we have a little bug. So what I usually use since a few weeks, I use also whisper flow, so speech to text to
Hmm.
just make prompting easier. And I would also say that I'm rather lazy in my prompting and trying more of a like a conversational style to get to the end goal. So usually it will go like this, where I say, okay, in this case, let's say the inspection audio recording inspection feature is broken. It doesn't progress past um, and issues, recognizing the issues since
Totally
we
understand what
added
it's.
the checklist feature. Let's do research and let's discuss the fix. Something like that. I mean, in this case, it's a fix, but usually I would build the next feature, or like, for example, last weekend, I built the whole payment and billing flow. So that was a bigger one. And then you go into the brainstorming phase where you go back and forth. And I'm not sure if it will go into that phase here right now in the brainstorming. Probably we'll do some research first and best case go into the brainstorming so we see the different options we can pick from. And then at the end, or let's say in the middle, at the end of the brainstorming, it will create a spec. So just a document with the requirements. And then I have a skill that I recently created, which is, I think, just should be very short actually. Red team, few lines of a skill definition, which is basically just telling it to dispatch to Opus sub agent and then dispatch one that should try to break the spec and one that should look into what's missing. And that was extremely valuable so far, where I really found a few blockers and bugs because the main agent didn't research thoroughly enough, for example, or made assumptions where it shouldn't have. So that was super helpful for me. And I would highly recommend to you can also just very lazily say, red team this spec, and it will understand more or less what to do. Maybe you have to still tell it to use a sub agent. But that's one of the most valuable things I learned in the past 2 weeks, I would say.
Um, let's try to. I'm gonna ask you something a little bit hypothetical, but like it is my understanding that like what you do at 1.5 when it comes to AI, like it's still trying to kind of like shift like the team, the approach to AI native, but probably you're not as sophisticated or as advanced as you are here right now. Um, what would you recommend with what you know already on how to introduce AI native workflows to like large or like teams, enterprises, companies? What limitations would you see or like kind of like hidden successes would you kind of like see with the approach that you're taking? Is it something that you would recommend at a higher scale or like at a place where like, hey, there's more kind of like an enterprise mindset where like, I don't know, this idea of like, let's move fast and break things, maybe not, that's not like the ethos of the company. Like, tell me a little bit more
Yeah.
about like, how would you kind of like go in that approach?
Yeah. So seeing how popular software, SaaS, and so on, things like the regular GitHub outages, for example, really show that just moving fast and breaking things for established enterprises is probably not the way to go. You lose a lot of trust in your product. People will look for alternatives and just be unsatisfied. So I'm not a super fan of it, while I still use it in the side project still right now. For 1,5, I think the biggest leverage thing first is like advocating for AI, and that you just share your wins with other people, because there are some that maybe have tried AI 1 or 2 years ago, and obviously back then it was bad and didn't do any good, and now it got way better, so they would have to try it again to really be surprised. And so that's like a thing where you share your wins, you share what's possible, and a few of your learnings and tips on how to make the things work. And the second thing is like, the better the context is that the AI gets, the better the results will be. So one thing that we started rather early in the mobile apps we built for 1,5 was really adding skills, agent rules, whatever it was back then, to uh, to formalize the guidelines how we build code. I think I started with tests because my main focus back then was really getting good at testing, learning test-driven development, and so on. So that was like 1 or 2 years of my Flutter journey was a lot around tests and how to test Riverpod providers, how to mock platforms. So all the way down to the native level, more or less, navigation, you name it. And all of those things took a lot of pain to find and learn, and go through GitHub repositories to find how to mock this and build that, and so the test works and is actually testing what you want it to test without any workarounds. And that's something that AI is super bad at. So they will just, maybe they just write a function that mirrors the other function or a class because it can't directly mock it or something. And then it tests something completely different. So I saw weird things already also with the latest models. I think that was 2 weeks ago, where I was like, what? You're not really testing the production code at all. So that's really formalizing the rules on how to properly do things, build widgets, architecture, and so on. And then also strengthening the pull request checks or CI pipeline, where as much of the things you can check deterministically, like maybe even strengthening your analyzer or linter rules, because I feel like with AI, it's less about what you prefer in terms of style, in terms of readability, but more in terms of really making the area of possibilities as small as possible. So there's basically at the end only one correct way to do a thing at the specific company, which greatly increases the quality of the output overall. So I think those are the two main levers I see. The one is formalizing the rules in terms of agent rules for the things you can't deterministically check in a CI pipeline. And the other things is all around people. So showing them how to properly use the tool. So we, for example, we have bi-weekly meetings where we share learnings and wins. We have a Slack channel where we share the latest news and shout each other out, and also share learnings and news. And we have an AI coding champions program where in each team we have a specific person that is responsible for driving AI adoption in their specific team, which also helps tremendously in that adoption overall.
Yeah. One thing that I've learned, um, very good ventures, we help like a multitude of companies like these days, not only to be successful in this better journey, but like of course with AI as well. And that gives you access to a big spectrum of ways of working. There are companies that they spend a lot of time in like infrastructure, testing all the stuff, and some others that they work more kind of like, no, we just are going fast and we haven't thought about what best practices and all those things. And one of the things that I'm very grateful that is part of our core DNA as a company is that at VGV best practices, they've always been kind of like the norm, not like something that is negotiable, right? Like actually a lot of like literature around architecture, linting. Like we have very good analysis that is even like stricter than like Flutter lint and all the stuff. All that, like as of today with AI, that idea of like well documented best practices and standards is more important than ever, to the point where like for us actually we have like this very good engineering side with our collection of best practices, where like actually we can deploy that as a fleet of agents within 5 minutes because we already had documented all the stuff. We just need to be like maybe more detailed with the language, more straightforward, more direct, because now we're writing for agents, not for humans. So there's less context that we need to share about understanding and teaching, and more about like how to get it done. But that transition for us has been relatively, I would say, like simple and painless. Uh, and that has helped actually our team to spend more time learning about how to extract all the use out of the tool, and not having to think about like, oh shit, what does like good look like in terms of like Flutter or TypeScript or Firebase or Supabase look like now, and they have to start from like the ground zero. So I think the comment that you made about process people is 100 spot on. By the way, we see that the agent finished working here, and now we have to give some
I
guidance.
Yeah, I think in this case, it's just blocked by the auto classifier in reading the production data. And let me see if that's enough. Usually you have to explicitly allow that it reads the production database. Let's see. The auto mode is very strict on allowing or denying access to production databases. So for those of you who don't know, in Cloud Code, you have the auto mode, which uses a classifier model, a separate one for each command that Claude tries to use, so the main agent. And that classifier model will basically block or allow based on the conversation context. So for example, it will block force pushes, production database deletes, even as you saw here, production database reads. And you basically have to say, like, I hereby grant you permission to do XYZ sometimes to actually allow it, and then the classifier will allow it to do. I often have that when I tell it to send emails, where the classifier will just block it because it's like a production action. Even though I have a whole skill built that I invoke at the start of the session, I still have to approve it. So sometimes it's a bit um, too strict, but that's much better than deleting production data if you don't want it.
Who cares about production data, right?
I hope you have backups enabled.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta say that I think that with the level of tooling and quality that we have these days around AI with Claude and all the stuff, I would say like if you get to that point where like you've deleted something that you cannot draw back or reverse something, that's not an AI problem. There's
Yeah,
something wrong along the
yeah.
way that like we can actually say like, hey, us as humans or the team, we didn't have the right.
I think it also fits good with what you said earlier, that it was kind of easy for you at VGV to transition because you already had very good practices. No pun intended there. Where
Oh, we do all those puns all the time, so don't worry.
nice. Yeah, it's great. And AI just amplifies whatever practices you have. So if you did the work already on, I don't know, building your sales script, building your coding guidelines, building your marketing, whatever strategy, then it's super easy to use that documentation, put it into AI or give it AI as context, and then AI will produce really good results from that. But if you have to start at zero, it takes obviously some time to get that knowledge together, either by learning, like doing things, breaking them, and then iterating and learning, or by sending AI off to find public resources to add to your knowledge base. So, yeah, that definitely, and also for the software development lifecycle, basically for the development practices itself, it's the same thing.
And yeah. Also, I think it's fascinating that while we're having this conversation, we're just watching these kind of like do a bunch of things in real time that Let me tell you, probably if you ask me as an engineer to kind of work in these code, I might not be as thorough as this is.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said earlier, AI enables you to do things that in areas that you don't have like deep expertise in. Like we are very good at building Flutter things, but I'm not as good as in writing SQL queries, especially complex ones, or building out backends and thinking about rate limiting and correct error handling and so on and so forth. And the AI can get you to let's say 80% very quickly, and then the last 20% you can iterate on basically. So that's always cool. And I think to add to the way I approach building things. After that brainstorming, you have those specs, and then you usually clear the context and then send it off with in Claude. You have the goal. I think Codex has this as well, where it's basically the Ralph loop. Where, for those of you who don't know it, it's about just starting from scratch with a specific prompt and iterating until you're satisfied with the result. And here the goal is another agent that checks if the goal was reached, and only then will allow the main agent to stop working. Otherwise, it will keep reprompting it until the the agent works.
Sweet. I'd think that there's more work to do, but if you don't mind, we're gonna transition. I know that we're reaching the end of the recording. I think that this is such a fascinating thing. Like we pivot from like property management to how you were starting kind of like building your kind of the structure of the company from like a sales approach, marketing approach, and then like building the product with AI. But now one thing that we do all the time with our very good engineering guests is a lightning round. Will you be
Nice.
up for it today?
Yes.
Awesome. Oh, this lightning round is just a series of like short and sweet questions that the less you think to answer them, probably the better the answer is going to be. So let's
Okay.
see.
Let's go.
First question: what core, cursor, anti-gravity, codex? Which one? And you cannot say it depends.
For me, Cloud Code right now still. I feel like Cloud Code is the strongest tool, still a bit ahead of everyone else, usually has the newest ideas. Anthropic overall is doing amazing work, especially for software development and for research. And I think I have overall a bit more trust in their models and their approach. So yeah, definitely Cloud Code. Also, the Max subscription is just so much bang for the buck. It's insane. I would pay thousands of euros for what I'm doing here, and I pay 200 euros a month.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I do. It's funny because I think that by the last quarter of 2025, October of 2025, we saw this explosion of like, I think like they came out with like the 4.5 models or like 4.4. And that's where like things all of a sudden like skills like became like huge. And I was on paternity leave back then. So I was like, see, like kind of like in a similar situation as you are. But to me, I was seeing like all this kind of like movement and transformation, even inside BGB. I mean, well, I was like, I want to be part of the conversation, but like, I want to also enjoy my paternity leave. Now, like, that gave me actually a lot of perspective on how much things changed because pretty much I went back to work from paternity leave to a new, different job that had nothing to do with the way I was operating. Like, of course, like the foundation, like we've been talking about best practice and all those things. As I said, like even those today are more important than ever. But the way you were applying it and the way you think about like growing the business, completely different. All right. Second question: Claude.md or agents.md?
Say agents because it makes it easier to switch tools.
Do you switch tools often?
Only between work and my side project
Yeah,
because I
same.
like using Cloud Code more, but at work we only have Cursor.
I really wish that the standard for agents.md was actually right now. I feel like it's lagging compared to Claude.md. Of course, like Claude, they only need like Anthropic only serve like that, while agents like they're trying to develop the standard. But like it's sometimes lagging so much that it's like it's painful to kind of like try to adopt it.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you have to remember lagging means 2 or 3 months. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. In
it's
2 3 months
not
right
a
now.
long time, but yeah, in
Yeah,
AI, it's just moving so insanely fast.
yeah. One MCP server, and I will add in there like or a plugin that you can work without.
Marinette MCP, definitely. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
making agents be able to drive the app themselves is so awesome to do, like, a few end-to-end tests and just validate what they're or verify what they have built. So definitely, especially since recently, you can now also do video recordings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's sweet. Yeah, yeah. Hottest take on vibe coding, real engineering or not?
I would say depends how much you give into the vibe. So if you give into the vibe too much, like, don't look at the code at all and don't really think about the systems around it, I would say it's not real engineering. But if you think about either the system or still go into the code and make sure you follow good practices, then I would say yes. So
Would you say what you're doing is vibe coding? I do have my own opinion, but I'm curious to hear yours.
I like to say vibe engineering more, but because I put a lot of thought in the systems I'm building. But I think if you look at the code, you would say I'm vibe coding. I wouldn't recommend looking at the code, and I also intentionally don't do it because I know if I look at the code, I will notice so many things that I would do differently that I probably couldn't sleep sound at night without thinking, oh, maybe I should still fix that.
If you work also like in a large enterprise, you will find cases like that, even if AI didn't write the code. So it's always kind of like where you set the limits. I think that to me, the way I interpret by coding is like, okay, you're just kind of like letting AI drive everything, but like you don't have the investment in like standards, like plugins, skills, knowledge that you're trying to build, right? I've seen cases where like you just go directly to prompt, not even like planning or anything like that, and like prompt to whatever gets produced. That breaks very fast. There's an approach to like AI assisted engineering that is like, hey, we're building the systems, the skills, the knowledge, how we track it. That leads to all that. Yeah, that, of course, like we know that like when you write software, like there's gonna be bugs or whatever, but I wouldn't call what you're doing vibe coding. I think I would call it more
It
like AI.
definitely takes a lot of time to get through the brainstorming part. It's usually often it's nights, 1 to 2 hours really of hardcore brainstorming in 2 3 sessions at once. And then during the night while I sleep, they usually execute and in the morning somewhere they merge the pull request.
Sounds good. The last question I have for you is property management software in 5 years. Do you think that's still gonna be like a SaaS type of kind of like field, or is gonna get replaced by agents and like agentic engineering?
I think German property management overall is rather slow. I feel like Germans overall are very slow to adopt technology and are more very security sensitive and try to keep things analog. I think for those of them who embrace technology, it will definitely be agents looking at the speed of the things changing. But for most of the industry, I think I'm not sure how many of them I can convince to get off pen and paper. I hope many, but we'll see.
Well, I think that you have the focus, you have the drive and the energy, and now you have relentless agents that they can do outbound for you. So you will make it.
Yeah,
Peter,
we'll
it's
get
been a
just
pleasure
keep going.
to yeah, it's been a pleasure to have you in the podcast. Certainly, I think that the next time I open my editor, my terminal, my agents to think about like what's the next project that I should kick off, you've made me rethink what would be my approach. And I wish you the best. I really hope that again, like you can make it and that you can actually prove to the German market that it's a different way of building great products. And I bet this won't be the last time that you and I will talk, because I think that there's so many things that we could even explore that we haven't even touched. So if you're up for it, I would love to host you again in the future as you make progress.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me. Was super fun.
Beautiful. And thank you everybody for listening. And we'll see you in the next episode of Very Good Engineering. Bye.
Bye bye.